My God, I love being in the company of brave men. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Cowan, and it's my honor and pleasure profoundly to introduce to you tonight's speaker, Colonel Tom Blagg. He was my commander during my service in the Republic of Vietnam. I was reluctant to do this. I begged off when I was asked to introduce him because obviously I'm no good at public speech, and I told them that I was going to be nervous and emotional, and I didn't want to botch the Colonel's, I'm sure, great message in a few minutes. However, I thought perhaps I might be able to give you a glimpse, up close and personal, of a true American combat leader and hero. When Colonel Blagg took over 2nd of the 8th, morale was at its ebb. He came on the scene with elan, dash, vigor, and enthusiasm, and he was one of us. He got on the ground with us grunts, and he was never afraid to get his hands dirty. But he was always in command. The first time I met Colonel Blagg, I thought to myself, gosh, I'd salute him even if he was a private. Such was his bearing and presence. And he was a huge man. And when he spoke, it rumbled. He was dead serious about the war, but he kept a keen sense of humor. I recall a briefing, and the colonel said, "Gentlemen, I'd give my left nut to accomplish this mission." Oh, I forgot I gave it my last tour. Another time, he and I were on our Australian Allies fire base when the alarms and sirens started screaming, which signaled troops in the field were in contact. Colonel Blagg's Australian counterpart, the Aussie commander, beamed, and he said, "Well, the Gooks just dropped a satchel charge in one of our APCs. We've got them where we want them now." Colonel Blagg just rolled his eyes as we lifted off from that asylum. Let me only say this. I've read scores of books on war, from the Peloponnesian to the one in Afghanistan, but I've only recently come to realize how many times Colonel Blagg saved my life and the lives of the men in the 2nd of the 8th. You see, he knew we weren't going to win in Vietnam. I, in my naivety and ignorance, thought we could win and pursued victory ardently. He saved my life and the lives of my men many times when he could have sacrificed us for the benefit of his career and promotion. He saved us time and again when he could have just fed us to the machine. He didn't. He kept my men and me alive many times by keeping us from harm's way, and he rescued our asses when we got them in harm's way. For those of you who didn't have the privilege of serving under him, I regret that for you. I'd walk through the fires of hell if he wanted me to, and maybe I did, and I'd do it again. Winston Churchill said, if a nation doesn't honor its heroes, it won't have any more heroes to honor. I'd like you to meet my hero, Colonel Tom Blagg.
Stand there and hold this thing, right? He's got to be smarter than the machine. Anyway, I came prepared. I told Callan one time I had to really work on whether or not to give him a medal or a court-martial. I'm not too sure you didn't earn the medal tonight. But because I have a great fear of running over, I took the opportunity to write down some things I wanted to make sure I got said. So Paul, Ed, Regan, Michael, Robin, John, and your wife, families of the Andy Skipper Association. It's really an honor, a privilege, and a very great personal pleasure to share with you this Denver reunion of the association. Now, it pains me a little to note that the collective group is somewhat grayer and a little more infirm than the last time I was here. But it's great to all see you anyway, and especially to have your families here with you. I thought a long time about what I was going to talk to you about tonight. For all, or at least most of us, it's been 40 plus years since we were in Vietnam. It'd be wonderful to have the eloquence and the speech and delivery to make remarks like Lincoln made at Gettysburg after the historical reference he made, but I looked around and said to myself, you're not Abe Lincoln, so let's do something else. So I solicited advice from family and friends and several of your colleagues about, what it is I really ought to talk about tonight. My sweet wife of 58 years, right on cue and without a break, said, just keep it short, dear. Now, I talked to some of your fellow soldiers too. They were a little more graphic, but with the same message. One said, when the audience starts stacking the beer cans up on the table, quit while they can still see over the stack. So I plan to be finished before you get 3 high. I would like to take a few moments to pass along some well-deserved thank yous. First, to Ed Regan, Stan Dillon, Rich O'Brien, Mike McGee, who started this whole thing years ago. Thanks also to all of you who have given time and money to see the organization grow into something unique, important both to the members and to the Eagle Scout soldiers who are still on active duty, and to their families. And a special thanks to 2 members who were persistent, one might even say relentless, in overcoming my reluctance to join the group. Michael Martin and Robin Root. Boy, you were right and I was wrong about what my showing up at a Delta Company reunion really means. This is my 3rd trip. I've been treated and made to feel welcome and a part of the group, and I thank you both for being persistent. Thanks also to John and his wife for a wonderful job. I really only have 2 minor complaints. One, it seems to me, living in Denver, we can do a little better with the down weather. And, you know, John, your sort of willingness to hammer your much older comrades on the golf course seems a little bit mean-spirited too. Also, I'd like to say thanks to my family. Billy, my wife of 58 years, and my oldest daughter Leah and her family are here. My other 2 daughters, Melanie and Amy, and their families are here in spirit. Like many soldiers, you know, they suffered the anxiety and fear of having a loved one in harm's way, and they had to help with my re-entry into a world without a bell in the operations center ringing, advising that there is somebody else in a life-threatening situation. So thank you for your love, your support, your strength and understanding in dealing with some difficult times, as I'm sure a lot of the ones who are sitting around some of these tables have done the same thing. So what can an aging old man say to a group of still younger, but you're not getting much younger either, old men? It's hard when the only advice you get is keep it short and watch out for beer cans. So what I considered a lot of topics, and you know, as a matter of fact, to scare some of you all, I thought about talking about this book. It's called An American Warrior, written by Doc Bonson. Bonson's been a friend of mine for over 50 years. His book is the best combat memoir of Vietnam I've ever read. During 3 tours, he got a DSC, 5 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. So he understands that of which he speaks. But we have a lot of guys in here who also know a lot of good war stories, so I thought, well, I won't talk about war stories. That's what this book's about. I also thought about reviewing this book. Michael Murphy sent that to me, I don't know how long ago, Michael, a year, 6 months or so. A book by Lewis Sorley called A Better War. Like Doc Bonson, I've known Sorley for 50 years. He's a West Pointer, 1956. We were on the faculty together at West Point. Although he's a little more scholar than soldier, but his book does provide probably the most readable and comprehensive history of the Vietnam War that I've read. Although scholarly, it's easy to read and answer some questions that have bothered me for a number of years. But the beer cans might be more than 3 high, so I decided this book would have to wait. As I was trying to come up with a topic, I received the June issue of Army Magazine. Just so y'all wouldn't think I made all this up, I brought them with me and you can look at them when you get through. It contains an article by Lieutenant General Walter Ulmer titled Toxic Leadership. It's a catchy title, and Ulmer was the chair of the leadership department at West Point while I was there on the faculty in the English department. He's one of the smartest guys I know, and he's made a life study of Army leadership. The article is fascinating. Some of you will enjoy, I'm sure, identifying toxic leaders you may have known over time based on Ulmer's definition. I wasn't worried if some of you call me Colonel T. I just pretend you're talking about Colonel Tom. But then I thought, on the other hand, why take a chance? In the same magazine was an article by Major General Sandy Malloy. When I was here last time, I talked about Sandy. He's the one who commanded the 1st of the 12th. When I came into country, they said, those of you in USRV go to the left, those of you who are in MACV go to the right. I went straight ahead out to the helipad, and Sandy Malloy picked me up and took me out to his fire base at 1st of the 12th. In this, it's not really an article, and it's a letter, an open letter to his West Point roommate, a retired Major General Neil Creighton. In the letter, Malloy tells about what really happened when some soldiers in his battalion, the 1st of the 12th, were made national news for smoking pot through a shotgun barrel. Now, the incident happened in 1971, so some of you were there at the time. And Malloy's letter makes it pretty clear why some commanders had a very difficult time accepting some of the reporters who came in. Then I looked at an article by Mark Thompson in the same magazine. It's the title of the article is the issue in the Time magazine. The thrust of the article is the separation that has occurred between today's active Army and the American population. And there are some significant differences between what he alleges here and in what happened to us when we came back from Vietnam. But in some ways, he says that the problem, the separation, is more serious and more dangerous than it was even for the Vietnam returning veteran. The basic problem is that in Vietnam, about 1.5% of the American population had people involved directly in the Vietnam War, even at the highest point. Right now, even with the Afghanistan and Iraq, it's only 0.5%. I found the article's premise probably more sad than scary. But like most of you, I've been away from the active Army for a long time. So I ended my topic search with nothing left to talk about. Although I recommend both books and all 3 articles for those of you who might fancy them. Before I get the evil eye and the index, and while the beer cans are less than 3 high, I would like to close with what Jonathan Swift called the modest proposal. How many of you ever read a modest proposal? Well then, my proposal is not made in. Swift suggested that the Irish solved the famine in Ireland by eating the children, which was a little ironic to say the least. My modest proposal is not intended to be ironic, but Delta, the 78th Angler Skipper Association, is a wonderful, viable organization. And I'm proud and grateful that you allowed me to become a lifetime member. But I'm 78 years old. And I notice that most of you aren't getting any younger, despite those who color their hair and their mustache. I've been thinking about it. I also note in the newsletter that Robin sends out that we seem to be losing more members than we're gaining. So it may be time to expand the base and figure out how to integrate Iraq and Afghanistan veterans into the mix. I know that some of you have been working with the idea of expansion and some change to the organization. Good job, keep at it. There's a lot of smart guys here, and I know there must be ways to figure out how to do that and do it well, without losing any of the great things that the organization already does and represents and is. Finally and last, let me say thank you to each of you for your service to your country, your continuing service and support of your association. And the thanks also is included to extend to the wives, sons, daughters, and other family members who have shared both the hard times and the good times and made things better for many of us. So as we say in the cab, Gary Olin, no slack in the cab.